In a year already rich with tragedies, from the bombing of 120 Iranian schoolgirls to the systematic memory holding of Irina Zaritska, from Europe's epidemic of migrant-inflicted savagery to the state-sanctioned murder of Noelia Castillo, Bruce Springsteen's performance at the recent No Kings rally in St. Paul, Minnesota, at least fell towards the more farcical end of the spectrum. With Biden-esque vacuity and Botox-smooth snarl, the septuagenarian rocker rasped his way through streets of Minneapolis, a newly penned colour-by-numbers protest anthem canonizing slain anti-ICE activists come propagandized agitators were nae good than Alex Preddy. The crowd, allegedly 200,000 strong, watched on in rapt solemnity. Grey-haired and misty-eyed, swaying arthritically beneath the horizon of pride banners and freshly Somalianized state flags, they appeared, for all their inflatable frog costumes and semi-choreographed dance routines, to be genuinely moved by this musical manifestation of progressive sanctimony. No doubt, it would be easy to deride such a spectacle as little more than nostalgia dressed up as dissent, as an elaborate exercise in generational narcissism. Both accusations would of course be true, and yet one need only trace the arc of Springsteen's 50-year career to understand why, for a great many boomers, he has long since transcended the role of stadium-filling superstar to become the purest distillation of, as well as the most eloquent spokesman for, their own deluded self-conception. After all, his is a reputation, or rather a carefully curated persona, which peddles a commodified version of the quintessential American rebel, the standalone crusader pushing back against a vast impersonal oppressor. Whether it be the constricting factory towns lamented and born to run, the exploitative economic elites indicted in Wrecking Ball, or the systematic injustice railed against in The Ghost of Tom Joad, the Springsteenian antagonist morphs across albums, even while his opposition to each remains the same, revealing neither a developing political consciousness nor an evolving artistic maturity, but a fixed assumption that resistance is at once perpetual, reflexive, and innately ennobling. This is precisely the archetype to which boomers have been conditioned to aspire. Raised on James Dean and Marlon Brando, and Jefferson Airplane, Flower Power, and the Sexual Revolution, theirs is a generation that categorically rejected the responsibilities of custodianship, the duties implicit in inheriting a world they would ultimately pass on, preferring to cast themselves as history rewriting iconoclasts, whose foremost calling was to freak out the squares and stick it to the man, remaking society as they saw it, in the name of freedom, self-expression, and authenticity. The fact that this overhaul was achieved through immense institutional power scarcely registered. Indeed, by the time boomers acquired the authority they once claimed to oppose, their non-conformist posturing had been so deeply internalized that it remained beyond scrutiny, even when their goals had become all but indistinguishable from those of Goldman Sachs, the Trilateral Commission, and every other instrument of the post-World War II order. The consequences for those who came after have proved nothing short of ruinous. Between the impossibility of homeownership and the millstone of debt they were bequeathed at birth, between ceaseless waves of third world immigration and the subsequent unraveling of all cultural, societal, and moral norms, millennials and Gen Z have been saddled with a bill they can never hope to afford, alongside a future which grows steadily and perceptibly bleaker. Their hostility towards those who ran up the tab is undeniably justified. However, even this might have been somewhat tempered, were it not for boomers' tone-deaf insistence, based solely on the prevalence of Netflix and DoorDash, that kids these days don't know how good they have it. No one epitomizes this conceit better than Springsteen himself. Having built a legacy on romanticizing the drudgery of industrial labour and the hidden desperation of men ground down by such systems, the boss, as the anti-corporatist icon is so ironically known, has amassed a discography delivered with such conviction and such granular specificity that it is easy to forget it is a reality of which he's exactly zero experience. Springsteen never worked in a factory. He did not endure poverty in any meaningful sense. While the characters who populate the river and Nebraska clock in and wear out, their lives measured in shifts, layoffs, and unrealized dreams, he was gifted his first guitar age 16, signed with Columbia Records a few years later, and spent the next 5 decades mythologizing a life he had only ever observed from the outside. This is the boomer paradox in miniature. Despite coming of age in an era of full employment, functioning institutions, and rooted cohesive communities, they chose to narrate their experience, in the most solipsistic manner imaginable, as one of confinement, alienation, and barely survived hardship. This is not, strictly speaking, a lie. Instead, it was an inability to recognize, or perhaps a refusal to acknowledge, that the stability which surrounded them, invisible in its ubiquity, represented the culmination of centuries' worth of struggle and sacrifice, interpreting it only as an obstacle to the excesses and indulgences this stability had made possible. It was this short-sighted egotism which compelled boomers to dismantle the load-bearing pillars of civilization. Just as today, it is this same egotism which blinds them to their own culpability for the rubble scattered about their feet. Most galling of all, their scorn is instead reserved for those actively attempting to clean up this mess. Needless to say, much has been made of the dramatic rightward swing within the youth of virtually every Western nation, most notably among Gen Z men. To anyone below the age of 40, uncorrupted by leftist indoctrination, the reasons are painfully apparent. Yet so wedded to their own virtuous self-assessment, boomers have chosen to point their collective finger at a lineup of conveniently anomalous culprits: YouTube algorithms, Russian disinformation, and Andrew Tate among the most reviled. What emerges is a supremely maddening inversion in which the language of compassion not only coexists alongside structural indifference, but is wielded as a weapon against a generation challenging a power which boomers are constitutionally incapable of admitting they possess, let alone habitually misuse. This pathology was brought into unforgiving focus outside the Minnesota state capitol. As the final chord rang out, Springsteen, the self-styled maverick and multi-award-winning billionaire, who would soon be followed on stage by senators, congressmen, and a procession of establishment-approved rabble-rousers, raised his fist and delivered his parting benediction.
Thank you, Minneapolis, St. Paul! No kings, no war!
The crowd erupted on cue. If one were to ask any of his garishly clad yet sensibly shoed congregation what it was they were cheering, they would likely have told you: for freedom, for democracy, for decency, immigrants, and the soul of a nation imperiled. Most would assuredly have believed it. Nevertheless, given boomers' penchant for performative indignation and chronic moral preening, it is difficult not to suspect that what they were really cheering was the validation of their own self-righteousness, a confirmation of their own rectitude, as well as the vindication of having their unexamined convictions reflected back through a mirror polished over half a century of stadium tours and critically acclaimed platinum albums. Certainly, when succeeding generations at last inherit the wreckage of Western civilization, their birthright squandered, the national credit cards maxed out, this is unquestionably how boomers will be remembered. But for now at least, in the shadow of Minnesota's Capitol Dome, the flags waved, the inflatable frogs bobbed, the edging troubadour shuffled off stage, and the myth remained intact. Hi everyone, and thanks an awful lot for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate if you could give it a like or share. I can't tell you how much that helps. Well, if you're interested in seeing others like it, please consider hitting the subscribe button. Alternatively, you can always find more of my written work over on Substack, the link for which is in the description. Thanks again for your time.